What is up, everybody, and welcome to Real Talks Podcast. We're going to break down what it takes to live life on your terms through entrepreneurship, specifically real estate investing. So we're going to hit it hard, the good, the bad, and the real, because that climb, as any entrepreneur knows, is never smooth. My name is Mike Singletary. I'm your host. So let's get real. What is up, everybody? So you are in for a treat today. I got a fantastic guest, somebody that I've known for years, actually. Always been super impressed with him. We've been in masterminds together. He is a very active investor, and I think he's got a fantastic story to tell. So the guest, his name is Greg Helbeck. He's a real estate entrepreneur, flipped and wholesaled over 180 deals since 2015. He's one of the top investors in the Hudson Valley area. He buys real estate in a few other areas as well. I know he's bought some in my market in Austin, Texas. He's also built up a rental portfolio since 2020. Before real estate, Greg was a college student. He had ambition to be part of the NHL. I had no idea, man. And in his spare time, loves to play golf, pickleball, experiences new locations, because I see him on Facebook and he's traveling all over the world, which is super, super cool. And it lives in Reno, Nevada. So, Greg, how you doing, man?
I'm doing awesome, Mike. Thanks for having me. That was a great intro.
Yeah, man. Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, that's pretty much it, man. I mean, I'm pretty much just doing deals, from my house or doing whatever I want. I've been able to, over 8 years, build up some pretty decent freedom. And I think that's why a lot of people get started, as they want that freedom. And it certainly is attainable.
Oh, it's 100% attainable. And I love watching, like I said, your story on Facebook, because you traveled to some awesome locations, man. I think was it the Philippines or Singapore? It was Singapore one time, right?
To Singapore, yeah, Japan, Dubai. I've been all over Europe. I've been everywhere, man, for the most part. I go to the bougie countries, though. It's an expensive habit. I'm like, I want to go to Thailand, and I think that's a little more third world than Singapore is, because Singapore is like, 10 times safer than America by a long shot.
That's awesome.
Crazy.
Well, you're living the dream, man, and you deserve it because you really worked hard for it. Like I said in the intro, I've known you for, from several years now. We've had some really good conversations. You're a man after my own heart, meaning that you have a passion for sales and marketing, right? And obviously our widget is real estate, but really it's just a marketing and sales game. Which one goes first? Is it the sales or the marketing in your eyes?
Marketing by a long shot. Yeah, I think because I've had this debate with people, and obviously I don't know if there's no right or wrong answer, but if you are a really bad salesperson, like terrible, like can't get 2 words out of your mouth, but you have a pretty good marketing system in place, what do they say? A broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah, a lead will fall on you.
Yeah. But if you're really good at sales and you have a big marketing problem, I've found that you're going to really work hard and you're going to speak with the wrong people. So I think obviously having both of them is like a superpower. But if I had to choose and I could only take one, I would take marketing skills, because that alone will get you success. Sales is almost like an insurance policy for your marketing plan. That's how I look at it.
I agree with you, man. You could always bring somebody in, just take that sales seat, right? It's hard to bring somebody in to take that marketing seat, because we've seen a lot of people try to outsource it. A lot of these franchises, that's what they take. And really, you're taking the lifeline of your business and depending on somebody else to do it. So once you build up that skill set, to your point, you could grow your business pretty easily.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because I've never been a big believer in getting a franchise in this industry, because I'm not saying they're not valuable. I'm sure they are, but like you said, I mean, you're pretty much putting your fate into someone else's hands. And, like, for example, there's multiple franchises out there, but, one of them, like there's a lot of like non-compete garbage you have to sign. So like, they're basically tricking you into like, oh, you only have to rely on us for marketing because we're so smart and we know what we're doing. It's like they're literally doing the same thing you can learn on YouTube.
And they charge you a lot for it. But
you're getting ripped off, and if you don't buy a house, you pay $2,500 a month. It's ridiculous.
Well, I was a part of the franchise at the beginning of my career, and it didn't take me long to figure out that. I mean, I thought, okay, the thinking process. And I think it always is like, hey, this is going to move my learning curve exponentially, right? But ultimately, it really cripples you at the end, because once I got out of the franchise, I had to really buckle down for a year or two and figure out that marketing piece, right? I had the sales piece because of the franchise, so I got to give them that,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, that marketing piece was something else. So I'll tell you what, man, talk to me about your business. What are you doing right now? Actually, you know what? Let's go back a little further. How did you start and how did you get into this business?
Sure.
The origin story, stuff like that, and then where you're at right now.
Yeah, man. I'm happy to talk about that. So the way I got into real estate, to give you the long story short, is I got out of hockey and I was living with my parents. I was 20 years old. I was a young kid. It was 2015. And I did not know what I wanted to do as a career because I wanted to play hockey. That didn't work out. So I was stuck pretty much from scratch. So I remember I always wanted to be rich and have a high income and wealth and whatever. I think everyone wants to be rich, but most people don't do anything about it. But I remember I thought the stock market was going to be my way out. And I'm like, I think I'm going to do Wall Street. I want to be Jim Cramer, and I started to look into it and read it and listen to it and watch it. And I don't know. It just, the stock stuff seemed very kind of a little high over my head, I guess. And then someone was like, I think we all intuitively know this. Like, there's a lot of wealth in real estate. Like, I think even if you're not in real estate, you know that you could make money in real estate because it's so expensive, right? And
Millionaires and billionaires are in real estate.
Yeah, exactly, right? And that's just like, that'll never become untrue.
Yeah.
So I remember I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then I started listening to like these little real estate podcasts that weren't even like, there's like not many back in the day, 8 years ago. And, they were talking about escrow and wholesaling. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. And then I went to a seminar, like a free local, kind of like guru seminar. And the guy explained double closing houses, which is a wholesale, basically. You buy and sell a property on the same day and make money. And I remember at that seminar, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a real estate investor. It was like a flashbulb hit me in the face. And I remember I looked back and my two friends were with me. We were in Newburgh, New York at the Ramada Inn on 300. I'll never forget it. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a real estate investor. And they made a pitch to like go to the next seminar, which was like $2,000. And I was like, they said that you could take a guest for free. So why don't we try to negotiate 3 for 1? And then my one friend, Kevin, was like, I'm not doing this. And then Devin, who's actually really successful now, was like, I'll do it with you. So we went in 50-50 and we signed up for this training program and we went to the seminar. It was like $2,000, pretty much half the money I had in my bank account. So I took a pretty big risk at the time. So I thought, and, they talked about marketing and they kind of covered everything. And then I remember after that, I just started, I never had a problem taking action, Mike. Like, taking action was never a problem for me. Like a lot of investors, like they read and they listen, but they don't do anything about it. Yeah. I was more of like the opposite. I was just going out and doing stuff. So, had no money to market back then. Craigslist, bandit signs, handwriting letters, the whole thing, like all guerrilla marketing that, you hear about. And it took me a long time, Mike. It took me about 9 months to get a property. And this is in New York, which is probably the hardest market in the country to do deals in because of all the there.
Yeah.
So I ran into a deal. It was like $5,000. I remember I was my net because I split it with another investor. And I had proof of concept. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I went back to my parents where I was living at the time. And I was like, hey, this actually works. I made $5,000 and I flipped the property. And they were like, wow, that was interesting. So then I went out and did it again, like 3 months later, and made like $10,000. And then, I started kind of doing deals every few months. I'd run into a seller who was motivated and I'd screw up the wholesale and I'd still find a way to make some money. And then after some time, I realized that I had the concept down. Like I had proof, but I didn't have a sustainable system that was predictable. So really where I went from like brand new to like becoming somewhat established. By the way, this took years. This was not like overnight. Is in 2008.
Nothing's overnight, man. Yeah.
Nothing's overnight, dude, except for, nothing. So I remember I had a couple problems. I had not a lot of experience. I had limited experience. And then in New York, it was so hard with these attorneys and all these down payments. I was just like really in over my head.
Yeah.
So I had this grand idea where I was like, you know what? And I looked at, here's a big nugget for people. I looked at the small handful of deals that I did, and I looked for the common denominators on why they were deals. And a lot of them were vacant, inherited, like delinquent tax or mortgage properties. So then I was like, well, what if I just found a way to only market to people who might be in that situation? So that was the first thing I realized. And the second thing was, if it's easier in another market besides New York, I might have a better chance of being more successful. So I picked Dallas out of all places. This is, like I said, years ago. And I'm like, I'm going to go into Dallas virtually, and I'm going to look for properties that are inherited vacant and they're delinquent on a mortgage or taxes. And I'm going to just call those owners myself and see if those people would sell their property. And that turned out to work pretty well. So after a couple months of really getting momentum doing that, I mean, we were doing 3-4 deals a month, all virtually. I was splitting this with somebody because they lived in Texas. And we were doing really well. And I started to see that like momentum, as everyone talks about, kick in, and then started saving money and then started flipping properties. And then I guess the rest is history. So now this year we'll probably do 55-ish like closed deals like that we actually got to the finish line, about 1.2 in gross revenue. And I have a small team. So I have some overhead obviously with that, but pretty good margins. And, our business, Mike, is a little bit different than the typical like local model, is where there's two schools of thought. There's like, let's go really, 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 really deep in one market and go on appointments. And then there's like, let's do nationwide and let's just get leads from anywhere and try to lock them up over the phone. We do a little bit of both. So we're not nationwide, but we're in like really 3 areas deep.
Yeah.
And we're going on appointments if it justifies it. But our first line of negotiation is through the phone because we just found that to be more effective. So we're probably locking up, I would say 90% of our deals over the telephone. And then we're wholesaling those houses out for pretty good profits. And then the 10% that we're not wholesaling, I'm either flipping the house as is, retail, fix and flipping it, like gutting it to the studs, or I'm going to do a rental strategy. So I'll buy it, refinance it and all that. So, and I've done any deal you could think of besides lease options I've done. That's the only like transaction I've never been a part of. Like sub-twos, novations, owner financing. Like I've done all that. I think that's tough to scale if you have all these different tools in the tool belt. I think you got to kind of keep it simple with cash offers if you can. We built up a pretty decent business and a pretty good reputation over time. So that's my, I guess, real estate story in a nutshell.
Dude, there are so many nuggets there, man. Especially if you're listening and you're on the fence and you don't know, where to start. Because I remember that. I remember because I've only been in this business about 8 years myself. So I still remember going to the RIAs and being in that back row, because I'm always a back row guy anyways, but not really understanding like, man, this might be too big for me, right? I didn't quite understand anything. You had the opposite. You're like, I think I got this right off the bat. But the thing is, man, you had no money, very little money.
No money.
Right? You put almost half of your net worth into this program. Guerrilla marketing. What was your most successful campaign? It was
Bandit Signs back
Bandit Signs. Okay.
They were inbound leads and they were relatively cheap because you could.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't know what Bandit Signs is. I mean, you can look it up and stuff like that. But you didn't but the perseverance, you did not get a deal for 9 months. Like 99% of people would have quit. Right.
Dude.
Well, what made you keep going? I mean, 9 months is a long time.
I knew that it was going to work. That's why I knew that it was going to work. So I remember when I was in my like beginning infant stages of a real estate investor.
By the way, how old were you at that time?
20
years old. Okay, guys, 20 years old. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, now I'm much older, but I was like, and it seems like that was years ago, but it really wasn't. And, I remember I would listen to podcasts because now podcasts started getting a little bit more popular. There's more to choose from. And I would hear all of this social proof, which is a huge influence factor, and like other people having success. I got this check. I got that check. And the social proof compounded with the action I was taking formed a belief that it was possible, right? And that's something that, if you're a marketer, the best way to sell is through other people and social proof. So I knew that it was going to work. I just didn't know when it was going to work, Mike. I didn't know when that seller was going to call me at the right time and I was going to be able to make a low offer and get it accepted. So I never doubted the business. Obviously, there are days where I was like, oh man, I don't know if this actually works. But subconsciously, I knew it was an actual valid strategy.
Yeah.
And I had enough people that I either linked up with online or met in my market that have done business to where I knew if they could do it, I could do it. It's just going to take me some time. And that's what I tell a lot of new people. I say, a lot of investors, they see something on the internet and they're new investors. And they're like, oh, I want to be a successful real estate investor. I should be successful from day one. And they don't understand if you start from scratch, you have no track record and skills and experience to lean on. Therefore, you shouldn't expect success right away, because if it was that easy, everyone would go out and they would send postcards and, you'd get a 10% response rate, right? And it just doesn't work like that, right? So having the right expectations in the beginning and being prepared to battle is mandatory if you want to be successful. Because if you're not going to have that mentality, you're going to just get clobbered up, because most sellers, I would say, listen, 19 out of 20 sellers are probably not taking your offer. So you're working in a needle in a haystack environment, and you have to be okay with that, because that one deal can change your life. If you have no money and you make $20,000 on one deal and you pretty much have no overhead, that will actually change your life, because then you have number one, income, and number two, proof of concept that you can go do it again.
Yeah, I mean, momentum, confidence, because in this game, confidence is such a big deal, right? Especially sales, just to your point, there's so many no's, right? And I mean, for us, we really mastered one campaign, which is outbound marketing. And I love the fact that you mentioned, like, keep it simple, because people in this industry make a mistake of doing too many things. And I've definitely been that person, right? I've had 25,000 mailers, 100,000 cold calls, all this stuff really spread out. And just get one campaign, specialize in that campaign, know everything about that campaign. Then you can add some others as you grow and grow your team. And I think that you did another thing that was super smart. People in this industry are fascinated with scale, right? And I mean, what does that even mean? Because a lot of people scale their way into being broke, truthfully, right? And it's not about how much money you make. It's not the top line. It's really the bottom line that is the most important. You know what I mean? And so I've gone through that whole spectrum of things. And now we still have a decent sized team, but we make sure that we're looking at that bottom line all the time.
That's something that I get frustrated when I go on the internet nowadays, because I'm more advanced and established. And like a lot of people, like, I'll give you an example, Mike. And this, I'm not trying to call anyone out here. That's not my objective. But people say, we got 50 contracts this month. Okay. And that could, to the naked eye, seem like an impressive metric. And it could be, depending on if you look under the hood. But just because you get a contract signed doesn't mean you're going to actually close on that contract, and there's going to be no title issues, and you're going to make money, and you're going to be profitable. So a lot of people use misleading metrics to kind of tout success, and it's not the real picture, right? So the number one thing I've realized by being in this business and doing it, I guess some quote unquote volume, is if I want to do, let's say 40 properties for the year, which we do more than that now, but let's say I want to do 40 properties. If that's my goal, to close on 40 properties, we did around that last year. I know I need to get 60 to 80 contracts, because there's going to be title issues. There's going to be sellers ghosting you. There's going to be all this attrition. So if I were to tell the internet, which I don't do, we got 80 contracts this year, that's a misleading number. And then somebody who might not get 80 contracts thinks they're a failure because they didn't get that, but they don't know the actual picture. So you got to play a game that only you're keeping score of in this business once you start to get established. And that's something I was telling someone the other day. Like, we were discussing something, and I said, you know what you got to do? You got to play your own game to your own scorecard, right? And you can't look at what other people might think about you and use that as a measuring stick on if you're successful or not. You got to play your own game, because at the end of the day, if you play your own game and you know what winning or losing looks like to you, you could be the judge of that, right? But if you try to use other people as a measuring stick for if you're successful or not, and this could be in anything in life, you're always going to feel like you're falling short.
That's 100%, man. I mean, I think that, in the circles that we go around, everybody's always talking about, that 100 deal a year, at least mark and stuff like that. And it's like, I know guys that do a quarter of that, but they make more money, and ultimately, just like you said, we're in this, almost 100% of people that get into this is for freedom. And you become like this slave to this machine that you created. And I'm definitely guilty of that as well. It really evolved for me within the last probably about 3 or 4 years, going, what is the real goal here, right? Is it my ego that I want to have all these closings, or do I just want to have the freedom? And we switched 100% to virtual 4 or 5 years ago, because, hey, it's really freedom. The deal amount doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's the net amount that matters. So I'm assuming from what you told me, you're a hybrid of a virtual, but mostly virtual, and it's still some belly to belly, right?
So there's funny. Brett's buying a house right now as we speak, my acquisitions guy.
Yeah.
And we made a judgment call this morning on our little huddle, was like, you know what? We're probably going to flip this house. So let's go out and see it, meet the seller, and get the deal locked up that way. That's the exception. That's not the rule, because 90% of our business is done through the telephone, mainly because of efficiency purposes, right? So we're in local quote unquote markets, but I have found, at least, and this is funny, Mike, I'm going to tell you a quick story that's going to make the listeners laugh a little bit.
Do it, man.
is a lot. And I think there's two sides to the coin here. So I'm not saying what I'm about to tell you is 100% true, like in terms of working every time. But I remember, I'll never forget this. This is before I had this is before I had a team. I was in my old office in California where I used to live. And I got a motivated lead at like a Friday night, right? And it's like most people are going to push that off till the next week or whatever. And I remember speaking to this lady. I forget her name. It was like an inherited scenario. And it was in Cornwall, New York, which is a great area. And she's motivated. She called off a mailer. And I was like, well, I'm in California, so clearly I'm not going on this appointment. Because if I was in New York, maybe I would have seen it, whatever. But I remember she told me, she said, yeah, I have an appointment set up like on Tuesday with a local investor. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, well, all right, she's probably not going to make a decision now because she's got an appointment set up. And this has happened multiple times. And I asked her a question. I said, listen, let me ask you this. I know you have that appointment set up with the other local investor. That makes sense. Would you ever sell the property just virtually if I can actually solve your problem over the phone? And she said, you could do that? I'm like, of course I could do that. I could make you an offer over the phone right now. And, if the numbers work for both parties, we could proceed. And I bought that house over the phone, and she canceled that appointment with the local person, bought it over the speed. Speed is key here. And that was a $40,000 wholesale deal. And if I were to quote unquote set the appointment for someone to go look at it, I probably would have been competing with the other person. So, and this has happened multiple times, right? So I have found that people think that you have a higher chance of getting the deal in person. Maybe. I need to look at data.
You get it cheaper.
You get it cheaper, maybe.
Yeah.
I have found, I've done this many times where the seller has an appointment set with a local person, and then we're like, well, what would it take to do business over the phone right now? And then you just negotiate. And like, if you know your market, this is the key. If you know your market and you know what stuff is worth and repairs, you can do this without much failure. But if you don't know what you're doing, I would probably recommend seeing the house if you're new. But we have won a lot of deals by being virtual when we didn't have to be virtual. And that really taught me, like, a lot of sellers at the end of the day, if you're working with the right people, they just want their problem solved. They don't really care if you're going to go there or not. So if you know your numbers really well, you can actually compress your sales cycle to be a lot faster. And then you don't have to be like dependent upon somebody going there on Tuesday at 3:00 or whatever. Like, you just lock the deal up, and then we sell pretty much all of our wholesale deals in Delaware sight unseen. No one ever sees it. It's all pictures. And the seller sends us pictures, right? So it like opens up the floodgates for like efficiency when you do it this way. And, we found it to work for years, right? So if it was like a flawed model that didn't work that often, I would say maybe we'll do a different way. But we have found through enough marketing and enough like offers that our conversion rates are still very acceptable by doing this over the telephone, and we don't have to waste our time. And like another thing too, and then we can chop it up. But I have found that something that really was a frustration point for me when I started was I would go on an appointment. I would drive 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back, spend an hour at the house. So I would burn up almost 2 hours to get a no when the seller wasn't qualified. And then I was like, well, I could have just made this offer over the phone and I wouldn't have had to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours there. So like, you could just make more offers, which ultimately will give you that conversion rate you want without having to go out and drive around all day, especially if you live in like, a busy area. Like, let's say someone lives in Houston or something. I mean, driving around Houston's a pain in the ass. It could take an hour to get from one part of the
Dude, it was horrible. I lived in Houston, man. I almost hired a driver because I was wasting my time all day and going from one appointment to the next. I mean, it really wasn't for me. So that's the reason why I went virtual. I mean, I think I know you nailed it on the head. As long as you understand the problem and convey with confidence that you can solve it. Right. And that's the key. Right. So before COVID, we were already virtual. So when COVID hit us, I mean, it took a little bit of an adjustment because people weren't allowing you to walk the houses and it's hard to sell for a couple months, stuff like that. But it was business like usual, man, because we already knew how to do it. And then after COVID, it made more sense because we used COVID as an excuse to buy virtual, because like we would just sit there and say, hey, listen, because of COVID, we refined the process and we just got it super dialed in to where we could buy your house just from pictures and we know exactly what's going on with your house. You know what I mean? So because of COVID, we just kind of put that into our sales pitch and they're like, oh, okay, well, that makes complete sense, right? Before that, some sellers are like, I mean, so
how can you buy my house without seeing it? Is this
it's just a scam? That's it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny when they say that. I'm like, yeah, I can never scam you into selling your house, although that's not true. People do that stuff with titles all the time, but it's not talking to them, right? But yeah, man, I mean, for me, it's a great model because I always work in reverse. So what that means is that I always wanted to buy houses or do my business on a laptop anywhere in the world and be with my kids, right? And to give me, I work from home. I mean, and stuff like that. I go on vacations and I could still work. So it just gives me that ability to do that. And it sounds like same thing for you.
Oh yeah, dude. It's funny. So the other day, me and my girlfriend were just hanging out all day at the house. And, I did nothing all day. It was a Sunday, a lazy Sunday, watching Harry Potter and stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember at Sunday at 8:00, I had this deal I locked up on Friday because my acquisitions guy was in Dominican Republic on vacation. So I was just kind of holding the fort down. And I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can sell this, because the seller sent me pictures that day and I had the pictures. And I'm like, let me see if I could sell this right now. I text this one guy who was a great buyer, and he's like, I'll take it. And then I went over, I was like, hey, Lena, we did nothing all day, but because the business is virtual, I just made $22,000 in theory. It's got to close.
Yeah.
Now, so from Reno, in Delaware, right? So when you can get the chains out of your mind and out of your business where you have to physically show the property to people, it allows you to do the business wherever you want. And it's amazing because you have this, you probably got to go on the computer for a couple hours a day, but you don't need to worry about being somewhere. I don't have an office. I used to have an office in California. It was a waste of money.
Yeah.
I would just go to the office and do the same thing I was doing at my house. I'm like, why am I paying this office bill? It doesn't make any sense. So
I felt like I had to be there because of my staff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was true. I've never had staff in an office. I've always had virtual staff. But I think when we get into this business, Mike, people they're at a job usually, or they're brand new and they're young. So let's say they're at a job. They have to go to the office for their job most likely, right? They have to physically be somewhere. So then when they start this business, they feel like they have to do it in an office, but then you also create another job that you happen to own with all this liability. So you could just understand that there's really no value this is the biggest thing I realized. If you have an office and you're a real estate entrepreneur, your office does not add any value to the process of you being successful with sellers and buyers and tenants at all. It doesn't do anything.
I might have to disagree a little bit, just very, because every once in a while you get that seller like, I want to go to your office.
We've never gotten that. I've never got that from a seller.
When I say very little, I can count on one hand, and all the deals I've done, right? I mean, so so I think we've got maybe like that, but otherwise, you're 100% right, man. I mean, it doesn't really all it adds is overhead. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to have. I mean, because truthfully, if you have your people under one roof, you can maintain the culture a little bit better. You can be.
I agree with that.
Advise them a little bit better. Stuff like that. On a virtual team, because we're 100% virtual, sometimes that's the biggest drawback. You know what I mean? What exactly are they doing this right now?
We had that with a team member.
Communication that you have to deal with Slack and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We had a team member that we actually decided to let go a couple months ago, and we never met her in person or anything like that. Yeah. And, she would take the huddles on her iPhone, which kind of was a problem, but it was it is what it is. She's still on the huddles. And then she would not do her job. And I was talking with Brett. I'm like, I wonder what she's doing all day. Because if she was in the office, we would have been able to obviously see that productivity. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there definitely are some drawbacks, but I think the benefits obviously outweigh the drawbacks. And if a seller asked me if they wanted to come to my office, I would send them to the title company, or I'd send them to a realty office or something.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And here's a good tip. So guys out there, use your title company for, what's the word I'm looking for? Use your title company for proof of concept. Okay.
Yes.
Anybody that sits there and is like, is this a scam? Listen, here's my escrow officer. Here's the title company. Call them, ask them how many deals we do. Right.
Yeah.
So we use the title company to go sign a contract if they need that physical space, because sometimes you have that old person, you're like, I don't want to deal with anything over the internet. You know what I mean? Yeah, I got to have the sign. And even if I tell them I'll send a notary over to your house, because that's typically what we do, they're like, no, I want to go in somewhere. Use your title company for that.
Yeah.
So that's super important. Hey, I want to dive in a couple of other things, because I know that you are a great marketer, right? And I want to know, because I know that you have really perfected a couple of things. And I know it was direct mail at one time. I'm not 100% what you do right now. So talk to me about what your marketing looks like.
Piece of our business. Yeah. I'll tell you the reasons why I like direct mail, and then I'll chop it up. So number one thing I personally like about direct mail is that it is relatively hands-off when you just can understand the number one metric that matters is return on ad spend, which means that how much money are you making compared to how much money are you spending on that channel. And the reason I like mail for that reason, there's a few things. The first thing is you can target who you want to market to, right? Google ads, you can't really do that. You're going to get leads from all over the place and, they might not have equity. But direct mail, you know that those people are probably going to be prospects you want to do business with, or else you wouldn't have mailed them most likely, especially if you're doing zip code mailings. That's the first thing. The second thing is it is competitive, right? It's competitive and there's a lot of expense to it. But generally speaking, if the response rate is 0.5%, which it is sometimes less or more, if someone's actually calling you off that, they're pretty motivated, unless they want to get removed from their mailing list, right? So if they want to get removed, that's
out there for some reason.
But if they're like actually looking to sell, like it's an inbound lead, the way I look at it. And then the third thing about direct mail is that once you set the system up and you get it running, and it is expensive, right? It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but it's very predictable because you can reverse engineer direct mail almost down to complete success. Because like if you said, I'm just going to use 10,000 mailers, obviously I would send more if you're in a competitive market, 10,000 mailers, you get a 0.5% response rate, you're going to get 50 phone calls, right? Most likely. Out of those 50 calls, you're probably going to have 20 to 30 actual leads that you can work. And you should convert at least one out of them. Maybe more, depending on your sales skills and who you're mailing. But like, you can pretty much say, if I spend this 10 grand, or if I send these 10,000 mailers, which is going to cost you about 5 grand, that should generally get me a deal on average. And maybe you need 2 or 3 drops to do that, but it's predictable because you could just keep rinsing and repeating that. And the other thing about direct mail that I realized that is just, I think it's hard if you're new. It's all timing, right? Like you're going to get 10,000 people, you're going to get 10,000 impressions. 10,000 people are going to see your marketing piece. And only the people who like really resonate with it, who are in the right place at the right time, are going to call you. So we see a lot of leads with direct mail where like they say, I've been getting your mailers for a year and we finally want to sell our house now. So they might have considered selling on the first 2 or 3 drops. Then the 4th and 5th drop, that problem might have been festering a little bit. And then on the 7th drop, they actually picked the phone up. So the thing I would say is like, if you're not willing to mail people consistently, you're never going to really know if it's going to work, because even though they called you on the 7th postcard, doesn't mean they were thinking about it when they got postcards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I like the scalability of it. I like the predictability of it. And I like that you can target who you want to market to, versus like with TV or something, like you're going to put your TV message out to the masses, and sure, you're going to get deals from that, but you can get a lot of leads in the middle of nowhere who you don't want to buy their house, and then it's kind of a waste of money. Another channel that we've done well is in the past is just calling and texting, right? Like, and people crap on calling and texting, but I'm like, if you just know what you're doing and you understand the numbers at scale, you can get a cheaper cost per acquisition generally with the same list. Yeah. And you don't have to spend the big postage fees you're going to spend with mail, but it's going to be a little bit more nurturing. But, there's trade-offs and benefits with anything.
No, that's 100%. I mean, I think that I love the fact that you really highlighted the consistency portion of it, because this is where the biggest mistake, people even in cold calling, because they think that, with cold calling is more of a nurturing game.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's really a pipeline play, right? Where you're getting to LinkedIn, you're following up, and then you convert them down, usually about 6-7 months, something like that. Yeah. But you have to look at it as, hey, this is a financial commitment for at least 6 months, preferably a year. But people, start freaking out when they don't get leads or whatever the case is, or deals within 2 months, like this isn't working. I'm like, man, listen, Greg, for God's sake, when he first started, it took 9 months to get a deal. You know what I mean? But everything has to do with momentum and consistency. You have to be on top of it. And with direct mail, it's 100% that, because I've done a lot of direct mail pieces, probably not to the acumen as you're used to, but it's always one of those things that, man, you have to stick with it for a long period of time. And sometimes it's hard, because if you're doing flips and you have a 25,000 or even 10,000, it really doesn't matter what the amount is, budget on marketing, you have all this money coming in and you get a little bit scared, right? You could definitely get a little bit scared, because this is a very polarizing game. You got a bunch of money comes in, a bunch of money goes out, stuff like that. But you got to stay the course, man. You want to be successful.
And that's something where, if you're not like with mailing, or even it could be any like mail, calling, text, any list-based marketing, the numbers are going to give you the safety, right? Like, and that's where I see a lot of people make this, because it's calling, texting, and mail. It's very similar, like with the numbers. Like people use such a small sample size to determine success or failure. They set themselves up to lose. Like I guarantee you, even if you went into like, I'm just making this up, but I would assume this might be right. So let's say you go into like, Miami, which is super expensive and competitive. Let's just say LA. Let's say LA. Right. Yeah. LA is like really hard, right? So people think, and I know people who make money there. You go to LA, and if you drop 100,000 mailers, or you do a calling campaign that's equivalent to that in terms of like the potency, you're guaranteed to buy a house, right? Because you have such a big sample size. There's going to be somebody in that pool that's going to do a deal with you in LA for 50 grand. But people, let's say they're in LA and they're like, well, I'm going to send 5,000 mailers out. Well, if you send 5,000 mailers out and you get a 0.5% response rate, you're going to get 25 calls. And out of those 25 calls, you're going to get like 8 to 12 leads. And you shouldn't expect to convert 1 in 8 or 1 in 12 on the first mailing. So they just use this little teeny sample size, and they don't understand that like the success comes within the numbers, right? That's like with any marketing channel, but especially like list-based marketing, you need to have a big sample size to go off of, or else you're not going to really know if it works or not, because you're going off of false data.
So you're a great salesman, right? You used to be a trainer for sales, sales academy. So what are you closing in direct mail? How many leads, qualified leads coming in to contract? What is your metric?
I'll pull the numbers up right now.
Yeah. Because what I'm trying to establish is like, if you're a newbie, this is what Greg does. And you can't expect that, right? I mean, because Greg's been sharpening his skills for 8 years, and he's great at negotiating, great at marketing. So you just have to give yourself a little more grace and a little bit more time, you know? So
my team does this, so I don't really do the sales, but our conversion rate with direct mail is 1 out of 9 leads gets converted.
That's absolutely great.
Yeah. That's contract, though. Let me share with you the number that actually matters here. This is the conversion, though.
Got you. You're talking about
1 out of 9 converts to a contract.
Yeah.
But 1 out of 21 converts to revenue. So we got a fallout right there. So that's what people don't talk about, right? That's why I'll share this on a podcast, because this is the reality, right?
That's real. Yeah.
So you might get 1 out of 9 and think you're cool, but we all know sellers change their mind, buyers flake out, title issues happen. Maybe you locked up the deal too high, or nobody wants it. So I know that if we want to look at leads to money, 1 out of 20, that kind of rhymed. If we look at leads to contract, 1 out of 9. So there's about a 50% gap there, right? So that's a hole in our business that we obviously need to investigate. So if you're a experienced investor, or you're decent at sales, if you get 1 out of 20, you should expect to probably buy a house and make some cash. Yeah. So you got to know these numbers, because when you know these numbers, when you have a bad month with marketing, you know the numbers are going to save you over time. But if you don't have your numbers in front of you, you go off your emotions, and then you think, oh, this is too expensive, I'm going to stop it. And then you're going to get no leads, and you're going to have no revenue. So you have to use these numbers to give you like that clarity, so you can go out and still do that process that's going to get you a certain outcome.
And you have to understand that it comes in clumps, right? You might not buy anything for a week or a month, and then all of a sudden 1 week you get a bunch of contracts, right? So 100%. That's just the nature of the beast. Whenever you don't realize that at the beginning. At the beginning, you think I'm going to get 3 a month consistently, or 1 a month, whatever that number is. It's not like that. It doesn't work that way.
We look at our campaigns, Mike, and like for direct mail, we'll track everything out per drop. And like one campaign, we'll get like three contracts, let's say 2 deals in 1 drop. And then the next drop, we're like, oh, let's do the same thing. We get nothing. And then the next drop, we get 2. And then the next drop, we get 0. And then the next drop, we get 4. So when you average out data for marketing, you have to understand that it does come in waves, like you said. And if you average a campaign out over 6 to 12 months, you can really look at these general averages. But you got to understand that your revenue might come in month 1, and then month 2 might be a little dicey, and then month 3 it'll come back. So you have to have that. The tracking is what really gives people that confidence to like actually do the work. Because like, for example, let's say someone's doing like cold calling, right? And they don't know their contact rate. Then they can't reverse engineer their funnel. Because if they don't know how many calls it takes to get a contact, then they're not going to know how many contacts it takes to get a lead. And then they don't know how many leads they need to get a deal. So you need to look at these numbers at a very high level in order to really figure out, is your marketing optimized for success? And if you look at your numbers and you could track your numbers and not have a lot of results, but at least you have data to go back on to make adjustments with. Because you could say, oh, my contract rate's 2%. How do I get my contact rate to 10%? And then if you solve that, that would hopefully get you more. So it's you see, like, it's just like you said in the beginning, you want to start with the end, you want to reverse. And if you reverse with numbers in front of you, you can take that funnel that might be broken and try to make assumptions to fix it. But if you're just kind of spraying and praying and just hoping for the best, you're not going to be able to sustain, because you're going to be too emotionally involved in the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, it's a tough business. I mean, it's I always say it's like it's the hardest way to make an easy dollar, right? I mean, it's just,
I want to steal that from you, dude. It is like it's
a tough business because you're going against fierce competitors. You know what I mean? That are consistent, that are skill stacking and stuff like that. So you just got to be on top of your game. And I can't tell you how often this happens where people don't track their KPIs. And if you don't understand what your KPI should be when you're beginning, that's okay, right? You can find it on YouTube. You can connect in RIAs. If you can afford it, I definitely recommend getting a mentor or joining masterminds to really, really help you out. Like, move you along that path a lot quicker. But the KPI tracking is 100%. Let me ask you this, man, on direct mail, a couple of nuggets. What do you do that's different from standard, right? What do you do that really kind of separates you on that campaign?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's two things. The first thing is that we like to start with the niche list first and then expand out to the broad lists if we don't get enough volume from the niche list. So like, I like tax delinquent, predictive data from Organic, pre-probate, which is like death, and then probate is like filed with the court because they're inherited. So we like the niche data to start because we found that we might not get that many calls, but the calls that we get are much more motivated, as they would say. Sure. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is actually the sales process. It's our ability to communicate with the seller on the phone once they call in, because a lot of people, they're going to call a couple postcards or they're going to go to a couple websites. So we try to stand out substantially on the sales process, so it allows us to convert our marketing at a better level versus the competitors.
I love it. Love it. So let's talk about the sales process, man. So, because we have a process as well. It's very Sandler based. I think that you and I kind of share that.
Yeah. Very
everything. Yeah. And everything evolves, right? Like you start bringing in, Chris Voss's stuff and the gap selling stuff. And,
it's all good stuff. Yeah.
And it's all great stuff, right? So I'm just going to throw some things at you and how you handle, well, I'm going to start with this. How do you establish rapport? Are you establishing rapport through property conditions, or are you establishing rapport during the outcome, desired outcome, or current situation?
The best way that I like to do rapport and teach rapport is just by listening to the seller and then repeating back to them what they said in your own words, so they know that you're listening to them, right? It's not talking about the Jets or the Yankees or the Texans. It's, hey, Bob, it sounds like you're selling because of X, Y, and Z. And then you're telling them what they told you, so they feel like they're understood. So that not only builds rapport, but it builds trust because it shows them that you're listening. That's my favorite way to build rapport. It's literally just being a really good listener by asking questions and then taking what they say and then saying it in your own words and repeating it back to them so they understand that you're actually giving a shit about their situation.
So how about the high Ds? If you don't understand what a high D personality is, a disc profile, right? The guys that are going to be really, really airtight, or the what's your offer guy. You know what I mean? How are you going to establish rapport with their, hey, man, you call me, or whatever, what's your offer?
The best way to do, like, those are tough sellers to buy houses from, first of all. Yeah. But if they're going to be buyable deals, I like to treat them how they're treating me. So if they're going to be direct and fast and straight to the point with me, I'm not going to go to this whole dog and pony show and why you're selling and sitting on the couch with them. I'm like, okay, sounds like you want an offer real quick. We'll get you an offer. And we go and we match their kind of demeanor,
energy,
and then they hopefully appreciate that because like I'm kind of, that's my personality. So like if I'm on the phone with somebody and they're both, let's say I got to get an insurance quote or something, I'm very just like, I want the number and I'm going to make a decision right away. And if somebody's like trying to take me down this loosey-goosey process, it turns me off. So if someone picks up on that, and let's say I'm the customer and they're direct with me, I'm going to appreciate that, and then I'm going to have a higher chance of doing business with that person.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way because I'm a high D person, right? Yeah. So I can handle it, right? And so
I don't want the bull, dude. I just want to get to the
you just give me what do you got? And of course, one of the biggest ones to take away is like, I'm not even sure if I can buy your house. One, right? But I got to give you something. It's going to be over here if I don't know anything about it, and then we'll go into, listen, man, you bought cars before. Have you ever bought a car sight unseen? Like you ever just bought it without even driving it? You're asking me to do the same thing with a house, man. So if I'm going to give you an offer, it's not going to benefit you at all, brother. Yeah.
Here's a funny story. This wasn't a high D personality, but this opened up my floodgates. Actually, I'll give you a better story because I'm thinking about this now. Man. We got a lead. This was last year. This was funny. It was an inherited property, physical piece of land, not house, right? In a very expensive area in New York.
I love
and
that.
The guy was a savvy, rich attorney who lived in Manhattan, who was probably worth $20 million, right? Like this guy was so rich, he couldn't be bothered. And he calls up and he goes, I got a piece of land. I want to sell it. It's in Rye, New York, which is like hedge fund managers live in Rye. And, I was like, and I had dealt with the guy myself because I was like, Brett, because it was like kind of a complicated like piece of land with like what you can build on it. So I didn't do any sales process with this guy because he didn't want to do any of that. He's like, I want an offer. So he had an appraisal too. He had an appraisal for the land. He's super savvy. And, I think I talked him down like 30 grand and just made the offer. And he took that offer and we wholesaled it for like 60K to a builder and, made a great fee on it. And that guy's personality only worked because I pretty much matched how he was doing. And I got right to the numbers and we got to a decision. But if I were to take that seller down some fugazi sales process where he would not have liked, it would have turned him off and then he would have sold to someone else, right? So
100%.
You got to know how to match somebody. And that's a tough thing for me, Mike, is because I'm a very direct, straightforward person. I am terrible with sellers when they're like very emotional and wooey-dooey. Like I'm like
the same, man.
I'm like the last person you want to have on the phone because I'm going to screw that deal up. And I've done this multiple times.
Yeah.
When Brett was like, we got overwhelmed with leads and I step in. Dude, I'm like a little like disaster with people because I'm so direct and certain. It just, some of these people just need to get nurtured, right? And that's just not my personality type in business. So I know my strengths and weaknesses and I try to only, really cater to my strengths.
Yeah, that's so on point. I'm the exact same way. I work really well with other high Ds, and I work really well. Yes. And I think it's easier to negotiate with really smart people because they understand, right? They understand.
Yeah.
They understand, right? Hey, listen, you're giving up time for money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what you're giving up. So that's
my favorite seller.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I have a house right now in California that we're in contract on. It hasn't closed yet, but like the guy's super savvy. He knows he's giving it at a discount. He didn't want it. Like the people, and that's the thing with real estate investors. They think you're going to go run into like a bunch of desperate people in foreclosure. Those are my least favorite sellers because they're emotional. They haven't figured out a way to get out of their house. They have to sell. They don't want to sell.
Yeah.
And it's like a psychologist, right? But the people who are just reasonable and like they know they're giving equity for convenience are the easiest sellers to deal with. And the deals always close. And oh my God, if I could just clone like some of these sellers that we've dealt with that are savvy, I would just make my life a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure, man. All right, let's go a couple more objections. I'm going to spitfire them to you. So let me think about it. Objection. Well, how are you getting through that one?
Yeah, so it depends on, that could be a good objection. Like that could be valid. So in order to really find out if that's true or false, you would ask the seller before you make the offer, if you were happy with this offer, what would your next steps be? And if they say they have to think about it at that point, then they have to think about it, right? But if you have a seller and they, you ask them, hey, if you were happy with the offer you got from me, what would your next steps be? And they were like, I would sell you the property. And then you make them the offer and they say they have to think about it. There's another deal killer in there that you have to figure out. Is it price? Is it other influencers? So you have to ask before you make an offer what their next steps would be if they were happy with what you presented to them. And then that's going to tell you if I need to think about it is fake on a smoke screen. But some people, honestly, Mike, they need to think about it. And we have bought houses from sellers that had to think about it when the competitor was forcing them to make a decision. And we let them think about it for a day because it is a pretty big decision. And we got the deal and made the money. So it's you have to look at every scenario from multiple angles. And you got to try to put yourself into that seller's decision-making mind. So, it's not like a one-size-fits-all thing, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely isn't. And I agree with you 100% because, this is a fine line between being too pushy and then making sure that you are asking all the questions necessary to get this across the finish line. You know what I mean? And more times than not, it is a smokescreen. I mean, they're trying
Most
to get,
of the time it is,
yeah,
yes.
and it is a smokescreen. But you're right, and that's where the nuances of the sale process is so important because, and I tell our salespeople this all the time, like, listen, nobody's going to come out and just give you their pain and motivation, right? You have to draw it out of people, and how that process happens is that they're going to give you these small little nuggets during the conversation that you got to pick up on, and they go, "Hey, what is that? Explain that to me a little bit more." You know what I mean? And I think that's the hard part at the beginning because people are so like, "Hey, I got to follow this script or this process," and you got to understand, dude, you're just talking to another human being, right? That's all it is. You're just talking. All you want to do is extract, like, I just want to understand your problem completely so that I can help you, you know?
And
And
I have a solution for you.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
man.
100%.
So that's
Everything
awesome, brother.
every sales scenario is not going to be the same as the other one.
No, as much as I want to standardize it, it never works.
It never works.
Exactly. So what's next for you, brother? Actually, you know what? I don't want to talk about that just yet. I want to talk about your gnarliest deal, what you learned from it, right? And how like, you know, what happened, how you grew from it.
Like crazy, like bad or good?
The one that comes to your mind going, dang, yeah, that one right there, that made me lose sleep at night.
Oh God, dude. I got a lot of them, but I'll give you one. So I bought a commercial, actually from cold calling, funny. It was a commercial, like 3 units of apartments in one storefront. And I thought at the time single family houses were for the dogs. So I'm like, I'm going to go on to bigger and better things. So I got this property locked up and it was a smoking deal. On paper, I looked like a genius. My attorney was like, dude, how did you get it at this price? And it was a vacant property. And I figured out why it was vacant after I bought it. But anyway, I buy this thing. I'm thinking I'm the smartest guy in town. It got appraised for $450. I think I bought it for $265. I'm like a genius. And, you know, I was like, I'm going to rent out the store. I'm going to rent out the apartments. I'm going to pull all this equity out of it. And I'm going to have this cash cow. And it was in like a, you know, a busy area, but not the best location. But anyway, so I get this property. I lock it up. I close on it. I get hard money. And then I'm like, all right, step one is I got to get the store leased out. And I did no research on retail, nothing. Like maybe called one realtor and then it didn't call me back. And I'm like, oh, I'll get this leased out, no problem. Can't find a retail tenant for the life of me. Get a broker involved. Can't find a retail tenant. So now I got this hard money loan on this property and it's just a bleeding. And I'm renovating the apartment. So I'm throwing out big money every month, like huge overhead on this thing, renovating the apartments, you know, whole thing, building's really old, can't find a retail tenant. So then I'm like I have a glorified triplex on my hands, right? Because this building does not serve purpose as a retail space. I'd have to convert this to an apartment, which is a nightmare when you're on a septic system in this town I was in. So then I was like, well, I'm going to sell this thing. So then I try to sell this property after I renovate the apartments. Nobody wants it. And I'm like, oh my God, I am screwed here. I'm going to have to physically write a check to the hard money lender and then own this thing free and clear and have like $250,000 tied up. Like that's insane. And I was willing to do, I was thinking about doing that because I was kind of getting not desperate, but like thinking worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, I call another broker and because I can't sell this house. And he's like, listen, why don't you fill up these 3 apartments with tenants, take it off the market, and then let the tenants pay rent for a couple months. We'll prove the P&L a little bit with the rental income, and then we'll sell it as a legitimate investment property. Like you walk in and you make money from day one. And the storefront was vacant the whole time. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. At least I'll get some cash now and I don't have to pay all this overhead. So I get 3 tenants in the property. The store is vacant and all the tenants start getting sick, right? They start getting sick and they're calling me because I was like the glorified property manager because I was like going to just sell it. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll deal with the tenants for now. So they all get sick. One of them moves out and I thought they were going to sue me, which they didn't sue me, but they got really sick from whatever was in this property. The other tenant gets sick. So I get a mold guy in there and I'm like, can you just make sure there's no mold here? And he runs this really expensive mold test. There's no mold in this property at all. And I'm like, okay, so the tenant can't sue me for mold. Like there's nothing in there. So then one tenant moves out. So now I got 2 vacant units. One's a store, one's the apartment. I get the third person upstairs now. Now that tenant was happy and then they get sick. And then I'm like, well, why is everyone getting sick here? There's something wrong with this building. And now I'm trying to sell it now. While this is all going on, Mike, I had the thing running for a couple months with income. We throw it on the market. We get a cash offer from a Hasidic buyer who's like, these guys have big money. They pay cash. So we're about to go into contract. Or no, I think we were in contract with him actually. And then the other tenant got sick. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I can't have these tenants keep leaving my building because then there's going to be no rental income and I can't sell at that number I want to sell it at. I just want to, and I was going to lose money no matter what because I just stupid.
You're trying to mitigate it.
The one tenant who got sick upstairs finds a giant bag of cat, which was causing them to get sick. They remove the cat. I get a demo team in there to like blow the attic up and get all signs of smell out of there. Things good to go now. We're getting closer to the closing. All of a sudden, the entire building, now it's around the holidays. This was like 2 years ago now, I think. I think it was 2 years. I'll never forget this. The entire septic system had a little leak in it and all the waste smell was blowing out through the air vents and the entire building just smelled like a giant piece. So I had a guy with a hazmat suit come over there, tried to do duct work. That didn't work. So all the tenants were like super pissed off and like I was trying to sell this thing. And then we ended up figuring out the problem. There was like this little valve on the septic that was, and we switched that out for like $300. Finally, the thing got better, sold the property at a loss and lived to see another day. But man, I could not sleep when I was doing that deal. And I was freaking bugging out because I had all this debt. And dude,
how much was losing that one, man?
Dude, oh God, man, that was 58 Ores Mills Road, man. Deal from hell.
How much did you lose on that one, if you don't mind? You want to answer
it was the friggin' mental
$10K. That's not bad at all, man.
But it was the mental loss.
Mental
loss, dude. It was
how
energy.
Did you have to deal with that?
What?
How long did you have to deal with that?
All the garbage was probably about 2.5 months, but I owned the property from I think I bought it in May and sold it in January. So I own this piece of shit. 7 or 8 months. Yeah, dude. It's a nightmare. I drove by there the other day with Lena. We were in New York and I said, you see that house?
Yeah.
If I have any gray hair, it's because of that house.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. And so, hey, absolutely. The mental loss is a huge one, man. You know what I mean? Because it's so much stress, dude. It's so much stress. I mean,
the liability, man. I didn't want to get 3 lawsuits from 3 because New York is a super litigious place. So like, everyone's got a lawyer, and that's what I was mainly worried about is getting tied up in lawsuits trying to sell with short.
So there's a bag of cat. There's cat there everywhere.
There was a bag of cat that was like basically fermenting in the attic, and the bedroom upstairs was at the same level as the attic, and there was a door that separated the two. So there was like fermented cat. Dude, it was bad. Dude, it was a bad deal. Oh my God.
That's hilarious. Yeah, you buy enough houses, man. You see some crazy shit. You know what I mean? I mean, it's disgusting. Some of the stuff that you see, truthfully, Crazy, but you can understand that you're probably going to buy deep more times than not.
Yeah.
This one, but most of the time you're going to buy pretty deep. I mean, we've had it where we found like dead animals under the couches. I mean,
it's
or
cats. I've had bathrooms.
Oh yeah, I remember one time I'm sitting there negotiating, and there were roaches crawling off from underneath the table, and I'm like, I was so disgusted. You know what I mean? That I called my wife on the way home, like, just leave us a set of clothes. I'm burning the ones I have on right now. I don't even go in the house. So it's something, man. So thank God we don't do that anymore. But hey, man, dude, this has been awesome. I appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing your stories and knowledge on this. How do people find you, Matt?
Yeah, so the best way for them to find me is just on Instagram at Grego_37. I put out daily videos on there, stories. All of our podcasts we do are done through Instagram. So if you want to connect with me and get to know me a little bit better, at Grego_37 on Instagram, that's the best way to get in touch.
And Greg does a lot of JVs in his area. So if you're interested in that, I mean, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So if you're in Delaware, New York, Reno, or even San Diego, I guess, and you have a property that you want me to buy from you, like I just bought a house off I'm buying a house off a wholesaler. He's making $105,000. I'm paying his assignment fee.
Awesome.
So if you have a wholesale deal you want to sell me, I'm a legitimate buyer. Or if you're just a wholesaler and you want a JV with me, I'm always open to that. That's one of our better marketing channels, actually, because of the the value we can exchange with each other. So if you're in Delaware, New York, the Hudson Valley, or Delaware, New York, Reno, or San Diego, and you have a property, those are the areas we know pretty well. So happy to help anyone I can.
Awesome. All right, man. That's a wrap. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Peace. So that's a wrap. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I hope you received value from this episode. If so, please share this podcast to your brothers and sisters, and also hook up with us on Facebook, IG, and YouTube at Real Talks. That's REIL Talks. Until next time, my friends, keep it cool, keep it real, and peace out.